Well, I'm delighted now to welcome Sheena Orr, who is chaplain to Her Majesty's Prison in Edinburgh. And Sheena will be talking to us about the call to service today.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I think it was about 10 years ago that I sat where you're sitting and couldn't have imagined that the journey that I've been on in these past 10 years. So as you sit here today, you never know where you're going to end up or what God is calling you to. What I want to do this morning is just talk a little bit about what my experience of the call to serve in the church has been, and some of the things that I've sort of experienced along the way, if you like, in relation to that calling. I'll be telling you a little bit about myself as we go through, and about the different stages, if you like, that I went through. So, as I am now, I'm an ordained Church of Scotland minister working full-time as a prison chaplain at HMP Edinburgh. I'm a wife who forgot to put her wedding rings on after I did the washing up this morning. I've got three grown-up boys. I like playing tennis, keen bird watcher, so if you see me sort of looking out of the window, then you'll know why I'm getting distracted. But they're all important, they're all part of us. We all bring all these different things to our calling, and all these different things will impact at one point or another as we're thinking about, why we're on this journey. And it is a journey. And for me, it was a long one, not one I could have really imagined. But God does call. And what does that mean in reality in our lives? Oswald Chambers was a Scottish missionary and evangelist and a chaplain at one point. Some of you might know of his My Utmost for His Highest daily devotionals, which, if you haven't come across them, I'd highly recommend them, because they were really written as he was as morning reflections for ministers that he was training. So there's a lot in it. If you're thinking of working within the church, there's lots that are relevant. And I want to use some of his observations to hook my own experience onto. And firstly, he talks about God weaving, or providentially weaving, the thread of his call through our lives. And I'm sure when you look back on your own lives, you can begin to see where a stirring began to happen. And I was talking with a friend of mine who has also now ended up in ministry, and we sort of said, yes, well, I first sort of got the stirring such and such, and then she'd go, yeah, but I actually, when I think back, it was then. And then I went, actually, when I think back, I can take it. And we ended up, really, we could go almost right back to our baptism, or to our childhood, or to something. And you realise that it's not that this call suddenly comes. God is weaving his way, as weaving this sort of call through your life. And it's just, at this point in time, it's the right time, might be the right time for you. And so God is sort of stirring it up. For me, I was brought up in a Christian family. I was baptized when I was 11, and went on to university, went away from church, went away from the Lord for a while, came back, realised I had to discover my own faith, what faith meant for myself, because I'd been brought up in this Christian family and had really just taken my parents' faith, if you like. So went through this whole process of saying to God, well, if you're really there, then show me. I ended up in a church where there were people who'd never known Jesus before they were 20, and they were standing up saying, this is the difference Jesus has made in my life. And so I had this really so powerful experience of God working in my life. And I'd always sort of, I think, felt I wanted to do full-time ministry, but because of the churches I'd sort of been brought up in, it was a bit of a no-no for women to be in leadership. So I just accepted that at the time. But I always had this sort of, God was obviously weaving this in, and at the right time I became aware of the call. And I suppose that's the next thing about just suddenly becoming aware that God is unsettling you in some way. Paul talks about it being a compulsion, this compulsion to preach, this compulsion to work, and there's something supernatural going on. You might know it as or Oswald Chambers describes it as a glow, but there's something supernaturally happening inside you, and you can't quite put your finger on it. Can you identify with that? Yeah? For me, I experienced it as a pull. It was like I almost had an umbilical cord. It was this like thick rope, and it just, for months and months, it was for me just like I was just being drawn, and I wasn't quite sure where, but I knew there was something supernatural, if you like, going on. But I mean, my initial experience was actually pretty horrendous. I was down in England. I used to work as a social and economic development consultant. I'd worked for many years overseas and came back and wanted to give something back to communities in Scotland. And I was, I ended up working in England going down to England for a while. And I was in Thornaby, one of the poorest areas in England, and I was staying in a hotel room, and I was working with Church Action and Poverty, and I was coming back every night, and for no reason that I could work out, I was just in tears, and I had no idea what was going on. And I would come back, and I'd try to do my work, and then I just couldn't. And so I started sort of, praying, asking God, what is going on here? And somehow I came across the Church of Scotland website and found out about inquirers conferences. And so at the end of the week, I went back to my husband and sort of said, I've just had this most bizarre week, and I was really upset. I couldn't explain it, but I just felt that something was happening that I had to move on. Now, my husband was a preacher's kid, so this actually horrified him. He was the son of a minister, and this absolutely horrified him that his wife was now going to become what his father was. Basically, his wife was becoming his father, as far as he was concerned, which was very difficult, very tricky, and so he said, well, he could see that if I didn't follow this pull, that I was going to be no good to live with. And so we decided that I would go to Inquirers Conference, and we agreed one step at a time. Oswald Chambers says, if a man or a woman is called of God, it doesn't matter how difficult the circumstances may be. God orchestrates every force at work for his purpose in the end. If you will agree with God's purpose, he will bring not only your conscious level, but also the deeper levels of your life, which you yourself cannot reach, into perfect harmony. And that's difficult at some points to see how that can happen when outwardly it seems that circumstances are so difficult. But things come together. I think what I've learned through the process is that God calls us into a relationship with him. He doesn't call us, if you like, to a particular service. There's a lot about this articulating your call. And yes, he does call us to serve. Sometimes we feel, I can say, I really do now feel I have a calling to prisoners and to prison ministry. But the primary calling is to this relationship with God. And if you take anything away from what I say, I suppose that's what I would want to say, because if you get that relationship with right, then the calling, the service, if you like, will fall into place. You'll know it, and God will lead you. You don't have to be able to say, in 5 years' time, I want to be a deacon here, or doing social work there, or a minister in this parish. God will lead you if you get that relationship with him right. The calling is to a relationship with him, so that we're then in a position to hear his voice. the way it unraveled for me, I remember sitting here and going to all the different sessions and thinking, well, I know I'm called, and I was increasingly beginning to feel it was to word and sacrament, but I didn't sort of feel 100% happy, and I always felt a little bit like this square peg in a round hole. And I went and I would talk to other people and they had very definite views. I'm called to this or I'm called to that. I didn't experience it like that. I very much just felt it was one step at a time and God would open up what was happening at the next stage. And I wasn't to worry about what was 5 years down the road. Just be faithful to Him in the moment. And so I started training. Initially, I started for what was it called? Auxiliary ministry. Because again, my pastor advised me, because of the situation with my husband, maybe don't go for it full time. Just do it part time, and sort of almost be a good little wife, and it'll all work out. Well, I got my first placement. And my minister sort of said, you don't really want to be an auxiliary minister, do you? You really want to do this full time? And I said, well, yes, that's what I really want to do. And so she actually put that down in my report. And when I got to my end of placement meeting, that all went fine. And then they said, can we unofficially talk to you? And they said, look, do you want to consider doing this full time? And that, you have these passions in your heart. God's made each one of us different. He's given each one of us a passion, and we each one know that when you talk to somebody about what you really want to do, people can see it. People can see you what you really want to do. And I thought, I'd have to go through selection school again, have to do this and that. And they just said, no, it's all right. We can, we'll accept the placements you've done so far. We'll slip you into the conference program. I would have to do all the full conferences again, but it just opened the door, and it just seems so easy. It goes back to what they were saying, that no matter how difficult the circumstances might seem, God can just open doors. So I ended up training full time. And then through that you go different placements as for word and sacrament. And it came to the summer placement, and I just felt I would like to go into a prison for my placement. And this had never been done before. And so I went. I think there were a few things that I sort of was always going back to 121 and sort of saying, can I do it this way, or can I do that? And so I went and said, would it be possible to do a full-time prison placement rather than a full-time church placement? So they said, well, go away, pray about it, have a think about it, and we'll see. So I went away, prayed, and still felt exactly the same. So they arranged for a chaplain to be trained as a supervisor, and I was accepted, or they then sort of made a 2-month full-time summer placement as in HMP Polmont. And I believe that has now gone on. Quite a lot of people now do prison placements, which is a great thing to do, I think. And even if you don't go on to be a chaplain, it's fantastic getting that experience of another part of society and another, apart from the parish setting. So this, I'd already been involved a bit in prison work through my consultancy. I've visited prisons. I've been involved with the Priorities Areas Committee of the Church of Scotland, doing a big study on how churches could get more involved with prisoners. So there was already awareness. There was already a sort of a knowledge of prison, but God began to shape that into this calling, really, to prison ministry. And I suppose for me, I brought along something. I mean, we'll all talk about service, but I brought along the kitchen sink, basically the washing bowl. And I suppose for me, the question became, as I was going through my training, is whose feet are you going to wash? Whose feet feet are going to end up in the bucket, if you like? You know, is it in the parish? Is it, you know, is it people you're counselling? Is it, you know, is it, you know, where is it? Where are you going to go? Where are you going to go with your bucket? And whose feet are you going to wash? Whose feet do you want to wash? And I became aware, you know, there was sort of certain things, not that I was saying to God, I don't want to wash them, but it's more, where is your passion? You know, if you could take your bucket and go and wash feet, where would that be? And so that became something that helped me to think about where is my passion? What's that passion that God's put in me? And as that relationship with him develops, as we listen to his call, that becomes sort of clearer. But I think it can also be quite a bewildering call. Oswald Chambers calls it the bewildering call of God. God called Jesus, he says, to what seemed absolute disaster. And Jesus called his disciples to see him put to death, leading every one of them to a place where their hearts were broken. His life was an absolute failure from every standpoint except God's. But what seemed to be failure from man's standpoint was a triumph from God's standpoint, because God's purpose is never the same as man's. I think it's very easy to say, as I was saying earlier, that, you know, I feel called to this, or I want to do that, or, you know, and we get some idea in our mind. But a lot of this is giving yourself the space to say, what is it that God is actually wanting to do in my life? And as we respond to God's call, we respond in service in the way that we serve him. And it can seem bewildering, and it can seem that outwardly things are not working out as we'd hoped. It might, you know, things might come into your life and it seems that, you know, why is this happening if I am following your call, God? But we begin, as we tune into God, we begin to see this purpose shaping inside us. Oswald Chambers again says, a Christian is someone who trusts in the knowledge and the wisdom of God, not in his own abilities. And if we have a purpose of our own, it destroys the simplicity and the calm, relaxed pace which should be characteristic of the children of God. We're not to worry about what we're called to, if you like, as we just rest in that trust and in that wisdom of God. Then it's his abilities, it's his call that will come through and become evident. At times I really wondered if I'd made the right decision. My marriage almost broke down through the process of going through ministry. But I was sure that I was hearing God's call, and I was sure that God wouldn't let my marriage fail. The compulsion to ministry was there, I couldn't ignore it, but there were times when I really wondered whether, what was happening. I've got another thing in my bag. Can you if you just pass these around, take one and pass them round. Just take one and pass them around. Just take one, pass it around. Take one, pass them around. Yeah, if you just take a handful and then pass them around. So, yeah. You all know what these are? Cardamom. Yeah. Do you know what you have to do when you're crush them? And heat them up. Get past pestle and beat them. Yes. So do you just want to crush it? Crush it gently. Yeah. What happens when you crush it? You smell it? Yeah, you get more of as it gets crushed. Yeah, you get more of the flavour. Now, I don't want to leave you all feeling crushed, but but realistically, this is what God is wanting to do with us, This for me is a symbol of the call to service, that God takes us and it's like he crushes us almost between his fingers, or even worse, he uses somebody else, maybe somebody you don't like, or a circumstance that you don't like, and it feels like you're being crushed. I mean, for me, it might be something different in each of your lives. For me, it was this marriage situation that I just felt completely crushed by it, and thought, sort of, how can any good possibly come out of this process? And yet, trusting God in this process is really what it's all about. It's like the bread that's set aside in the communion, that's blessed and broken and shared out. Or the wine. Again, Oswald Chambers says, if we are ever going to be made into wine, we will have to be crushed. You cannot drink grapes. You cannot drink grapes. Grapes become wine only when they have been squeezed. So there might be times, and there were certainly times in following this call, that I felt crushed, but I knew at the end of it, or I now can look back, and my marriage is much stronger. It's a marriage that I couldn't have imagined 10 years ago, through sticking with it and by following this call through. And there is a cost to others. There can be a cost to others. If we obey God, it's going to cost other people more than it costs us. And that's where the sting comes in, if you like. If we're in love with the Lord, obedience does not cost us anything. It's easy to say, I want to serve in this way, I want to follow this, and our passion's there, and we want to follow it, and life is wonderful, and it's a delight. But it costs those who don't love him in the same way. It can cost them a good deal. If we obey God, it might mean that other people's plans are upset. They might say, is this what you do as a Christian to others? And we can prevent suffering. I could have given it up and said, no, that's right, I'm not going to go down this line. But if we're going to obey God, we mustn't prevent it. Oswald Chambers says, beware of the inclination to dictate to God as to what you will allow to happen if you obey him. And I found that, and that's probably one of the most difficult, allowing God to have his way, even when it appears that other people are suffering. But in the long term, God always has that much longer term view than we have. So stick with it. Listen to what God's saying. In the end, once I had completed my training, my husband had got a job in Kenya, and I ended up working with, through the Church of Scotland, making a link with the Presbyterian Church in Kenya. I was ordained into ministry in Presbyterian Church in East Africa, and went to work there from as a Church of Scotland minister to the Presbyterian Church in East Africa, where I was based in a church for a number of years, at the weekends, part of the preaching team, and then during the week I would work in the prisons and as part of the chaplaincy team, and at prison headquarters doing development work as well there, until I saw a job for full-time chaplain at Edinburgh. And not many full-time chaplaincy jobs come up in Scotland, so this was a real opportunity to come back and to do something that really was sort of on my heart. I've just got a few notes here. What helped me along the way? I think Prayer and devotional life, obviously. I've mentioned Oswald Chambers, but that is the number one priority. And alongside that, having somewhere to retreat to, somewhere to go to so that you can listen to God, help you to be alert to the signs, to put the pattern, to see that weaving together, to see where it's leading. Finding books of writers who can really speak into your life. I've found great value in honouring you, and you'll have your own, but read around, and sort of you'll find readers who really begin to speak to you, and then read other books by them, and quite often you'll find you really go on a journey with them. And journaling, is a good way of being able to look back again and see the way that God is working in your life, and beginning to pick up the signs and see how things fit together. So God calls each one of us into that relationship with him. And it's not a call to something, it's a call to someone primarily. And then we respond by offering our lives in service to this King of Kings. And that service can take many forms. It's a service that might change over time. It's a service that may turn out to be very different from what you initially thought. And that service may be something that you haven't even heard or thought of yet. God is doing something exciting in the church today. I pray as you learn about the different opportunities to serve as you spend the day here, that you'll be blessed and encouraged, and you'll listen to that call of God as he speaks to you. And I end by throwing a question out to you, that whose feet are you going to wash? Thank you.